Big question. What is directing? It's kind of one of those really ambiguous questions that everyone will probably have a little bit of an opinion on. And so, just like all my previous episodes, this is my opinion, this is my thought process. Feel free to chuck it out if you don't agree. Feel free to also chuck in some comments below. So in my opinion, directing is not about knowing every technique, knowing every concept of how to create a story, how to light something, how to film something, how to get an actor to do something. But what it is knowing what is the right question to ask. Now, this sounds kind of strange, but by understanding that you need to ask questions constantly as a storyteller, as a director, it enables you to know how to answer situations that come up at every single stage of a production. Problem is, what questions do you ask? There are obviously so many questions out there, and a lot of them are actually going to lead you up the wrong path. So today, I'm going to go through what I believe are the right questions to ask as you go into your films, choose your next script, develop your next script, create your next story. So probably the first question many of you ask, once you've made a few films, you start to think, well, what film should I direct next? Or what films should I be directing? So now you have to start asking yourself, well, who am I? And how does this impart itself on the films that I create? So interestingly, this is actually an evaluation of your experience in life so far. So think about what's happened to you in life, whether you were bullied at school, whether you were on a sports team that won or maybe lost, whether you have created a film that didn't do so well, or you created a film that won lots of awards. What's happened to you? How did you feel at that time, and how did you react? You're going to start to understand what type of person you are. And just like a lot of writers, they utilize what they know. First, you as a director should also utilize what you know to be able to tell your stories. So, for me, a little about my history, I lived in the UK and up until 2012, and I was totally and utterly focused on being a director, working out what that meant to me and what my voice was as a director. You know, that big question,
what's your voice?
Well, we'll get into that in a little bit and how problematic that is, but it wasn't until I actually moved out of the UK for a period of time that I actually got to live in another society. And suddenly, when I came back to the UK, the films that I was interested in watching and even making totally and utterly changed, because suddenly I had something to compare the society I grew up in against. I'm not saying go out and move country, but I am saying you do need sometimes to have something to compare your world against. Otherwise, you don't really know what is and what isn't relevant to your own story. And I can use that to make those scenes unique. And that is the beauty of filmmaking. Now, I'm going to maybe say something a little controversial here, but I think quite often we're actually drawn to the genre of the films that we enjoy watching. But there is another way of thinking about it. So when you start to use some of the techniques that I've shown you in previous episodes, we start to draw out what the core of a film is, the action of a story. The actual logline of a film isn't actually the genre, but it does give you the story of the film. It could be stories about rebellion, or fish out of water, or tragic love stories. You're no longer dealing with genre, but you're dealing with a story type. So you can actually wrap those story types in different genres. You could take a tragic love story and put it in a science fiction genre, or you could put it in a period drama. And then you start to understand that the power of the story that you're interested in telling isn't necessarily based on the genre of film. So how can you use this? Why is that really powerful? Well, now you can start reading scripts and not base your scripts on the genre of the film, but instead what happens to the characters. So you read the logline, you read the synopsis, and you can start to look at, well, what are the characters having to deal with in this film, and am I interested in that? Now we get to one of the most destructive questions that I want you all to avoid if you possibly can. And that is, what is my voice? So throughout this episode, we've been tackling questions that are far more constructive to your development as a director and what stories you should be telling. Also, how to develop those stories to make them more yours. But I can tell you that question has been one of the most destructive questions in my career. This is a really popular question to ask, and I've listened to so many directors in interviews, and they say that they don't really know. They don't really understand what their voice is, or what makes them who they are, or recognizable as a director. Very famously, Martin Scorsese has also been recorded saying that exact thing. He doesn't know what makes his films, they just resonate with him. Another great question is, should I follow my gut? Well, yes and no. Your gut is a great compass, but as you all know, a compass kind of points you in a direction, but it doesn't actually let you know how you need to get there. Right? So you're reading a script or you're watching a film and you're like, oh my God, I love this. But now you need to do the work. The work is actually breaking down what was it about that film or that script that you loved. Was it the way it was shot? Was it what happened to the characters? What do I remember? What really resonated with me and made me excited or sad or drawn into the film? It may mean that you have to watch the films again or read the scripts again and start making notes, play and pause, analyze these films, because it's also going to enable you to know, okay, what actually really inspired me about this film is this. Cool. How do I bring that into my film? Don't just copy it, but how do I make it my own? So I have 2 awesome tips to help you define exactly what questions you need to be asking for your films. Tip number 1, read. Please, read everything you can get your hands on. Just read voraciously. Every directing book, every fiction book, every pictorial book, doesn't matter. Reading is proven to have some of the best developmental results, a kind of a return for time investment, if you were, of almost any type of practice. So I'm going to say reading. Every time I've taken the time to read, I have reaped so much benefits. So much understanding comes from reading. Even if it's not about filmmaking, you will glean so much from reading other people's own inspiration, ideas, concepts. The second tip I can give you is don't focus on the filmmaking. Right? We all look at the cameras and the lenses and the shot sizes and the editing and all this. That's the sexy part of film. But you as a director, your most important responsibility is to ensure that the script that you hand over to your cast and crew is ready to be made. And it's not just that, it's the film that you know through and through. Get out of production mode and just really dive into the film. Give yourself the time to develop the story. Because ultimately, we all know this, if you don't have a good story, you can't make a good film. So, in review, question yourself, question the script, question absolutely every aspect of what makes you unique as an individual in your life, how you've reacted, how you've acted, and what's happened to you, and transfer that into the films that you are going to create. Also, take some time to really understand what really resonates with you in stories, not genres, but the stories themselves. Read as much as you can And finally, give yourself the time before every production, before every story, to really delve into what makes this story yours and how you can make it even better.